monarchy will be shifting in a slightly different direction.
I think it's safe to say that change is...
The musicians had taken their places. Crystal glasses stood beneath the chandeliers. Dignitaries were approaching Buckingham Palace, and the banquet had been rehearsed to perfection. Then William looked toward the sovereign entrance line and saw one face that should not have been there. Within minutes, the prince issued an order no one expected. Close the doors, halt the arrivals, and cancel the banquet before the king entered the room. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had arrived early because Charles had delegated ceremonial discipline. A state banquet is a formal dinner hosted by the monarch for a visiting head of state, and every position carries meaning. Catherine was expected beside him, Camilla beside the king, and senior diplomats behind them. Tom Parker Bowles was not meant to stand there. He was a private relative, not a working royal. The prince checked the reception board again. Tom's name sat inside the sovereign entrance line, the official order for those entering behind the monarch. Camilla's son had been placed among royals, as though he represented the crown. William did not raise his voice. He removed the place card, folded it once, and set it down quietly. The silence became heavier than any shout. "Stop the vehicles," he told the Lord Chamberlain, the palace official responsible for ceremonies. "Close the ballroom. Inform the delegation that the banquet cannot proceed." Courtiers froze. Catherine watched her husband and understood that he did not see a clerical error. He saw a deliberate breach. The future king had signed the approved reception order that morning, and Tom's name had not appeared. Camilla received the news before entering. An aide stepped into her reception chamber and told her the evening had been halted. She asked, "Did William give the order himself?" When the answer came, the queen consort's expression hardened. Her son had been removed, and the state occasion had collapsed around that decision. A protocol officer brought William the amended schedule. Tom's position had been added 2 hours earlier. Beside it stood a handwritten instruction, approved at the highest domestic level. No signature appeared, but the paper had come from Camilla's private office. Charles sent word asking his son to delay the announcement until they had spoken. William refused. The cancellation was already in effect. The king, he said, needed to ask how Camilla's son had reached a place reserved for the crown. The banquet had stopped at the palace doors. Behind them, one question threatened everything. Had Tom stood in the wrong place, or had someone begun rewriting the royal order itself? To the public, it looked like a disagreement over a guest list. Inside the palace, everyone understood it was far more personal. Tom Parker Bowles was not a foreign official, a working royal, or a constitutional figure. He was Camilla's son, and his presence beside the monarchy's senior representatives forced William to confront a fear he had carried for years. Private family loyalty was beginning to claim privileges that belonged only to the crown. Tom had always occupied an uneasy place near royal life. He was welcomed at private dinners, family celebrations, and smaller gatherings, yet he held no formal rank. A working royal means a family member who performs official duties on behalf of the monarch, and he had never held that role. Camilla did not care about that distinction when it came to her son. She saw family, not hierarchy. She believed he should never be made to feel like an outsider inside the world she now inhabited. William saw something very different. The prince had taken greater control of state planning, as Charles reduced his workload, and every ceremonial detail now carried weight. The sovereign entry line was the formal order showing who entered directly behind the monarch, and therefore appeared to represent the crown. To him, placing Tom there did not simply offer respect. It silently granted status. Camilla removed one glove and pressed it flat against the table. She demanded to know whether her son had been publicly removed from the line. When the aide confirmed it, the queen consort's anger sharpened. She believed William had not merely corrected a mistake. She believed he had humiliated Tom to deliver a warning directly to her. Tom stepped away when an equerry quietly approached him. An equerry is a royal officer who assists senior members of the family during official duties, and this one spoke with careful restraint. Yet the moment Tom saw his mother approaching, he stopped. He turned back and asked whether he had been invited honestly or placed there as part of someone else's fight. The answer changed everything. Tom explained that his invitation identified him only as a private guest. A palace aide had met him at the entrance, guided him past the civilian reception point, and directed him into the royal sequence. He had not requested the elevated position. Charles studied the cancelled seating plan in silence. The king removed his glasses and set them beside the paper. He understood his wife's pain, but he also knew his son had discovered a change he had never approved. Catherine then noticed a small symbol beside Tom's name. It matched a confidential access code used during an earlier palace gathering. That mark carried the story backward to a private dinner, a moved chair, and the moment this crisis truly began. The cancelled banquet did not begin with the name on the entry list. It began 3 weeks earlier, during a private Windsor dinner that almost no one outside the family knew had taken place. There were no cameras and no foreign guests. Yet before the evening ended, Tom challenged a palace instruction, Camilla made a promise she could not quietly keep, and William witnessed the moment that convinced him a much larger confrontation was coming. Charles had called the dinner inside Windsor Castle to settle a problem before it grew. The Oak Room was being used for a private family discussion, and the guest list included William, Catherine, Camilla, Tom, and 2 senior household officers. A non-working relative is a family member who may attend private events but does not perform official duties for the monarch. That distinction mattered because private access could not be allowed to look like public authority. Tom found his place among the private relatives. His chair stood away from the central royal table, where those representing the sovereign were seated. The arrangement did not exclude him from the family. It separated affection from duty. Then Tom moved. He lifted his place card, carried it toward Camilla, and placed his chair beside her. A courtier approached quietly and asked him to return to the assigned position. Tom refused. He said his mother had told him he would no longer be treated as secondary family. William did not challenge him first. The prince looked directly at Camilla and asked whether she had authorized the move. She answered without hesitation. No son, she said, should be made to feel inferior in his mother's home. Catherine heard the danger in those words. The Princess of Wales suggested they pause the dinner and resolve the matter privately before a family wound became an official rule. Camilla rejected the delay. She said the issue had been postponed for too long. William then warned that emotional pressure could not be used to change royal order, because once that boundary moved, it would be almost impossible to restore. Charles could have ended the argument with one sentence. Instead, the king said they would review the position later. Camilla heard permission. William heard avoidance. Tom remained beside his mother for the rest of the meal. The following morning, Camilla's deputy requested a ceremonial access marker for Tom. The marker was a coded palace credential, allowing special entry at selected events. The request claimed Charles had approved a temporary family protocol. He had signed nothing, yet no one canceled it. William returned after the room had emptied. Catherine watched him move the chair back to its original place. He said the next attempt would not be settled quietly around a dinner table. 3 weeks later, Camilla entered the palace room to face him, and neither was willing to move the chair again. The doors to the private council room closed with no aides inside. On one side stood William, holding the altered entry document. On the other stood Camilla, still dressed for the banquet that would never happen. She did not begin with an apology. She began with an accusation. Her son had been escorted from a royal line, foreign guests had been turned away, and she wanted the prince to admit that the cancellation was never about protocol alone. William placed 2 sheets on the table. One was the final approved entry order, the official document showing who would enter and in what position. The other was the amended version. Tom's name appeared only on the second page, inserted between Catherine and a senior royal duke. That placement mattered because it made him appear to represent the sovereign rather than attend as private family. Camilla stared at the name, then looked back at him. "You canceled a state occasion over my son." The prince did not step back. He said the banquet had been canceled because someone had tried to present Tom as an extension of the crown without lawful authority. Her son, he insisted, was not the target. The secret use of royal machinery was. Camilla's anger broke through. She accused William of accepting her as Charles's wife only when she remained invisible as a mother. She said Tom had spent years entering through side doors, waiting behind others, and being reminded that he belonged close enough to be judged, but never close enough to be respected. William answered with equal force. He said private hurt could not be allowed to create public rank. If one family request could alter the sovereign line, then every future boundary could be pressured, softened, and quietly erased. Camilla pushed the amended document back across the table. Her hand trembled. She asked whether he would have canceled the evening if the unexpected name had belonged to someone from his own family. Yes, William said. The answer stopped her. Camilla then admitted she had supported greater ceremonial inclusion for Tom. She had instructed her office to bring him through the senior entrance, a controlled arrival point used for prominent guests. But she denied ordering his placement inside the sovereign line. William opened the original note from her household. It requested only family entrance assistance. The later copy had changed those words to sovereign entry placement. Someone had rewritten the instruction after it left her private secretary. Camilla read the altered phrase twice. Her anger shifted into alarm. She warned William that tracing the change might expose someone neither of them was prepared to confront. The battle had begun between them. The wording now pointed beyond them both to a figure with enough power to turn a mother's request into a royal command. Royal power rarely announces itself with raised voices. It travels through initials, coded instructions, private secretaries, and words chosen to sound harmless. As William followed the authorization trail, he discovered that no one had signed the order placing Tom in the sovereign line. Yet every official had obeyed it. The decision moved through the palace as though the king approved it, and someone had created that illusion. William called a restricted review inside Charles's library. The prince brought Catherine, the Lord Chamberlain, the king's principal private secretary, and Camilla's deputy secretary into the room. A restricted review is a closed examination, limited to officials directly responsible for a sensitive royal decision. Each person received the altered instruction, and each understood that one false assumption had already destroyed a state occasion. The chain of command left little room for confusion. Any change to the sovereign reception line required written approval from Charles, his delegated heir, or the Lord Chamberlain acting under direct authority. None existed. William had not approved it. The ceremony chief had not approved it. The king had signed nothing. Charles read the phrase, "approved at the highest domestic level" twice. The monarch placed the paper down and looked toward Camilla. He asked whether she had believed those words referred to him. Camilla did not answer immediately. The queen consort told her husband that after the Windsor dinner, she expected him to support greater dignity for her family. She had heard reassurance in his words. Now his silence forced her to face something painful. She may have mistaken comfort between husband and wife for permission from the sovereign. William refused to let the distinction remain blurred. The prince said the monarchy could not survive if private conversations became official commands, simply because aides feared asking difficult questions. Charles stiffened at the severity of his son's tone, but the king could not deny the principle. A senior aide finally spoke. He admitted hearing Charles tell Camilla, "We will make sure Tom is properly looked after." The assistant believed the monarch wanted the dispute settled. He changed the request from entrance assistance to sovereign placement and allowed staff to assume approval. The confession deepened. The aide said Camilla's household had repeatedly asked when the king's promise would be carried out. Fearing her displeasure and Charles's hesitation, he used wording broad enough to avoid a direct refusal. Charles now faced three choices: punish the aide, rebuke his wife, or challenge his son for canceling the banquet without waiting. The monarch could no longer stand between them. The delegation wanted an answer. The palace wanted direction. And one decision would determine whose authority survived the night. By midnight, the chandeliers had dimmed, untouched tables were being cleared, and food prepared for hundreds of guests disappeared through service corridors. But the real damage could not be carried away. A state occasion had collapsed. Camilla's son had left through a side entrance. Charles faced diplomatic embarrassment, and William was about to learn that drawing a necessary line could still wound almost everyone standing near it. Palace officials moved quickly, because delay threatened more than reputation. They described the cancellation to the visiting delegation as an internal security and protocol failure, meaning a breakdown in the rules controlling access and ceremonial order. The visiting president accepted a private audience the following morning, preventing public anger from becoming a diplomatic rupture between governments. Charles then approved immediate consequences. The aide who changed the instruction was suspended from ceremonial duties, while Camilla's deputy secretary lost the authority to request access changes during the review. The king knew those decisions would protect the institution, but they could not repair what had happened inside his family. Tom Parker Bowles removed his banquet medal and placed it inside his coat pocket. When a car from his mother's household arrived, he refused it. An equerry approached, but Tom told the royal officer he would not return to any function where his presence could be turned into a weapon. Then he walked away alone. Camilla watched from an upstairs window. The queen consort saw her son cross the courtyard without looking back, and her anger toward William began to collapse into grief. She had wanted to protect Tom from feeling secondary. Instead, her pressure had exposed him to the most public humiliation of his life. Catherine found William standing inside the empty ballroom. The Princess of Wales remained beside him as he looked toward the vacant place where Charles should have delivered his speech. The prince said canceling the banquet had been necessary. Then his voice dropped. Necessity, he admitted, did not make the result painless. Charles signed a formal statement before dawn. The king accepted responsibility for the palace failure and confirmed that his son had acted within delegated authority, which meant William had been officially empowered to protect ceremonial rules. That sentence prevented anyone from quietly reversing the decision. Charles still rebuked them both in private. He told Camilla that affection could not manufacture royal rank. He told William that power must remember the people crushed beneath its symbols. Tom sent one final message before leaving London. He asked to meet William alone without Camilla, Charles, lawyers, or palace officials. The next decision would belong to two sons shaped by the same marriage in entirely different ways. For the first time since the crisis began, there were no uniforms, no place cards, and no royal titles between them. William met Tom in a small sitting room at Clarence House before sunrise. Neither man brought an aide. One had canceled the banquet. The other had become the face of the scandal. Yet when the door closed, their conversation did not begin with blame. It began with a question neither of their parents had answered honestly. William arrived alone and found Tom beside an untouched tray of coffee. The prince closed the door himself, making clear that no official record would be taken. Clarence House is the royal residence used by Charles and Camilla, but that morning it felt less like a palace and more like neutral ground. Both men needed honesty without secretaries turning every sentence into policy. Tom spoke first. He admitted moving the chair at Windsor had been wrong. His mother had convinced him the separation between private relatives and working royals was cruel, and he had acted from frustration. Now he understood that one angry gesture had given palace officials permission to turn resentment into an official rule. William listened without interrupting. The future king then admitted something harder. He said the banquet was cancelled because the sovereign line had been breached, but seeing Camilla's son standing there had touched older wounds. The placement carried questions of loyalty, inheritance, and the memory of his mother. He could not pretend the decision had been entirely free of pain. Tom reached inside his coat and placed the coded access marker on the table. The badge was a special palace credential, allowing controlled entry at selected royal events. He pushed it toward William and said he had never asked to represent the crown. He would accept no position created through his mother's influence. The confession did not condemn Camilla completely. Tom explained that she wanted him treated with dignity, but she had never made clear where dignity ended and royal standing began. Her love became pressure. Palace officials, frightened of disappointing her, turned that pressure into unauthorized power. William finally separated the two ideas. He promised Tom would remain welcome at private family gatherings and would never again be publicly humiliated over an entrance. But state lines would remain limited to those officially representing the sovereign. Tom accepted the boundary. Together, the two men drafted a joint statement, acknowledging the breach and rejecting the idea that one was an intruder while the other was a tyrant. By sunrise, the private conflict had found its answer. Outside, however, the cancelled banquet had already become the only story Britain wanted to discuss. The public never saw the altered instruction or heard the private apologies. What they saw was a banquet cancelled without warning, official cars turning away from Buckingham Palace, and Tom Parker Bowles leaving alone beneath the palace lamps. By morning, that single image had divided the country. Some believed William had defended the monarchy from private influence. Others saw a son publicly punished for his mother's position. Then one newspaper front page transformed the argument into a national verdict. Broadcasters interrupted scheduled programs before dawn. They reported that the Prince of Wales had cancelled the state banquet after discovering an unauthorized name inside the sovereign reception order. That order was the formal sequence, showing who entered behind the monarch, and therefore appeared to represent the crown. The story mattered because one altered position had stopped an international event and exposed a private family conflict. Palace officials released a statement confirming a protocol breach but omitted Tom's name. The silence did not protect him. Photographs from the entrance had already spread, and within hours his identity dominated every headline. The palace wanted to contain the crisis, but secrecy only made the public more suspicious. The Chronicle captured the national mood most sharply. Its morning front page placed the empty banquet table beside the image of Tom leaving alone. Across the page ran 5 unforgiving words. "The crown is not a family shortcut." Tom saw the headline at a roadside cafe outside London. Another customer unfolded the newspaper without recognizing him and began discussing the scandal aloud. He lowered his eyes, left his tea untouched, and slipped through the rear door. The humiliation he had tried to escape had followed him beyond the palace gates. William faced judgment too. Supporters praised the prince for stopping a dangerous precedent before private influence became permanent. Critics argued that canceling a state occasion over one altered position was excessive, cold, and humiliating. The future king had defended the boundary, but he had also become the symbol of its cruelty. Then the joint statement appeared. William and Tom confirmed that the placement had been unauthorized, that Tom had never requested royal standing, and that private relatives would remain separate from official representatives of the sovereign. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace holding signs that read, "Protect the line," and "Family is not the enemy." When phones began displaying the statement, the shouting softened into conversation. Camilla watched the public fury weaken. She then asked Charles, William, and Tom to meet one final time. The nation had judged royal privilege. The emotional verdict still belonged to the 4 people who had brought the palace to the edge. The final meeting did not restore the banquet, erase the headlines, or undo Tom's humiliation. But it forced the royal family to say aloud what years of careful silence had concealed. Camilla had wanted her son protected. William had wanted the crown protected. Charles had tried to preserve peace by refusing to define the boundary between those 2 desires. In the end, the monarchy survived because each of them accepted that love could not be allowed to impersonate authority. Charles gathered Camilla, William, and Tom around a small table at Clarence House. The king placed the cancelled banquet order in the center, not as evidence against anyone, but as a record of what their silence had allowed. A protocol is a formal set of rules governing royal conduct, and this crisis had exposed what happened when those rules were replaced by assumption, emotion, and fear. Charles accepted responsibility first. The monarch admitted that his words after the Windsor dinner had encouraged Camilla to expect a change he never intended to approve. By refusing to give her a painful answer, he had allowed palace staff to invent one. His silence had not preserved peace. It had simply delayed the conflict until it became impossible to contain. Camilla then turned toward Tom. The queen consort told her son that her determination to protect him had placed him inside a position he never requested. Motherhood gave her the right to love him fiercely, she said, but it did not give her the right to build royal authority around him. Tom took her hand. He forgave his mother, but he also drew a boundary. He would attend future state events only through the same process as every other private relative. He would accept no special entrance, no ceremonial position, and no implied rank. William reached into his pocket and removed the folded place card. The prince placed it on the table, opened it, and wrote 3 words beneath Tom's name: "Private family guest." He did not erase him. He defined his place honestly. Charles then signed a formal protocol. Relatives of royal spouses could receive private family hospitality, but they could not enter sovereign lines, hold ceremonial precedence, or represent the crown without an official public role. The banquet was rescheduled. Tom declined to attend, Camilla supported his decision, and William personally apologized to the diplomats whose evening had been disrupted. The cancellation had been severe, but it prevented affection and fear from quietly rewriting the monarchy. William defended the crown. Tom reclaimed his dignity. Camilla confronted the danger of protective ambition. Charles finally chose clarity over temporary peace. There would be another banquet, another procession, and another sovereign entry line, but never again would anyone inside that palace mistake personal love for constitutional power. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.